Hello everyone.
Hi.
So we will look at this chart first and then we will start with the class. So last time we discussed regarding these two things that were borrowed from Government of India Act and Constitution of Australia. Now we would see what all features were borrowed from the Constitution of Canada. So they were federation with a strong center. So federal scheme is borrowed from Government of India Act, right? That there would be like division of powers between center and state. But the concept that center would be stronger as compared to like states, right? That there are more powers given to center, and also during emergency center is given more authority. So that concept is borrowed from the Constitution of Canada. Similarly, vesting of residuary powers in the center, appointment of state governors by the center, advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So all of these features are borrowed from the Constitution of Canada. Now we'll start with the remaining parts. So how many types of fundamental rights do we have that we discussed in last class? Like categories of fundamental rights. Anyone remembers? Types of fundamental rights that we discussed in last class. Anyone remembers? There are 6 different types of fundamental rights that we have. First is right to equality. Second is right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, then cultural and educational rights, and right to constitutional remedy. So it starts with Article 12, but Article 12 and 13 are some other provisions relating to fundamental rights. Similarly, from 14 to Article 32, we have provisions relating to fundamental rights under the Constitution of India. Now, starting provision is Article 12 that provides for definition of the term state. Right now, if fundamental rights are given to us, right, we are being given certain fundamental rights. But when someone is given certain rights, someone else has to have a duty. If we are supposed to enjoy a certain right, then someone else has to provide that facility or provide that thing to us so that we can enjoy our rights. So Article 12 provides for definition of the term state, and it tells us against whom we can enjoy those rights, who all would be the authorities that who are bound to provide those rights to us. So it is the state who is supposed to provide or make all the facilities for enjoyment of these rights by the common people. So Article 12, you should remember that it is what defines the term state against whom we can enjoy these rights. This is clear, right? Article 12.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it says that the government, the parliament, the legislature of states, other local authorities, any bodies which are registered under any particular statute. So all of those we can include under this particular definition. Now, Article 13 talks about laws inconsistent with or in derogation of fundamental rights. Now, firstly, we know against whom we can enjoy these rights. Secondly, what it says is that providing rights is not enough, right? Providing fundamental rights under Constitution is not enough. There might be other statutes, there might be other legislations which might violate the fundamental rights. So we should also ensure that apart from providing these rights under the Constitution, we should also ensure that no other law, any other thing is violating these fundamental rights that are guaranteed to individual or that are guaranteed to the people of India. So Article 13 talks about laws inconsistent with or in derogation of fundamental rights. Now this term law, it may include what? It may include the laws made by parliament, laws made by state legislatures, ordinances, orders, bylaws, rules, regulations, notifications, customs, usages. So it may include anything which would be applicable to people of India. So bylaws would mean maybe any laws that are made by a certain university, right? So all of those things, what happens is that it is included under the definition of law. But what is not included is any amendment of the constitution which is made under Article 368. So that part is not inserted. Otherwise, what happens is that we are kind of, like limiting this particular power given to parliament, right? If everything comes under judicial review, then we are in a way limiting the power that we cannot even make changes to the constitution. So this part is excluded from Article 13. But otherwise, it includes not just the statutes or legislations that we have, but many other things also. Now, there are like three important things that you should know. Firstly, it says what? The laws that were applicable before independence. What all things would be void under that. Then says laws that are made after the constitution came, what all would be void. And it says that laws in force includes laws made or passed by parliament or any competent authority before commencement of this constitution and not previously repealed. Now, there are three important things that we should know from part 13 of the constitution. They are the concept of judicial review, the doctrine of severability, and the doctrine of eclipse. So there are these three things that are included under Article 13 of the Constitution. What is doctrine, like judicial review? Concept of judicial review. Anyone? Concept of judicial review. What do we mean by judicial review?
It means the power of courts to validate or invalidate.
Yeah. So judicial review means what? It is power given to the courts to validate laws that are made by the parliament, right? So if any law is made by the parliament, what court will do is that it will see whether those laws are, like violating any provision of the constitution or not. If not, then that particular law would be applicable. Now the concept of judicial review, from which country this concept is borrowed? Anyone remembers from which country? The concept of judicial review is borrowed from which country? It is borrowed from the Constitution of United States. So this is a famous case of, like American Constitution. It is Marbury versus Madison. What happened in this particular case is that in this particular case, the Supreme Court of United States, it recognized the concept of judicial review for the first time. So for the first time, the Supreme Court said that there is a concept of judicial review, and for under which what happens is that American courts are given the power to strike down any laws, statutes, or any actions of the government which would violate or go against the provisions of the Constitution of United States. So what the court decided is that if there is any act, there is any legislation, any statute, or even an action taken by the executive, right? What happens is that if it violates provisions of the Constitution of United States, courts have the power to strike down that particular, like law, statute, or action, whatever it is. So the concept of judicial review was for the first time recognized in this particular case. And then they already had this particular concept. So what we did is that we borrowed the concept of judicial review under the Constitution of India also, and then we made provisions for that under Indian Constitution. Part 13 of the Constitution. Now there is one Indian case also that you should know. It is L. Chandra Kumar versus Union of India. So in this particular case, the court also recognized the concept of judicial review. This case is clear, right? First case. So it basically is that the Supreme Court for the first time recognized the concept of judicial review in United States, and then the concept was borrowed in India as well. Under L. Chandra Kumar versus Union of India, what happened is that there was a constitutional amendment. It was the 42nd Constitutional Amendment of 1976, under which what happened is that two articles were inserted in the Constitution. They were Article 323A and 323B. So these two articles provided for, it made provisions for establishment of various tribunals as adjudicatory bodies. And also what it said is that it enabled parliament and state legislatures to exclude jurisdiction of all courts except Supreme Court in regard to matters or areas coming under jurisdiction of these tribunals. Basically what happened, under 42nd Amendment Act, these two articles were inserted, and parliament and also state legislatures were given the power that they can establish certain tribunals like an adjudicatory body, and whatever matter is coming under their purview, no other court except the Supreme Court would have power to, validate those laws. We already have, right, under Constitution, we already have given that power to Supreme Court and High Courts. So under this amendment, what happened is that it took away that particular power of judicial review from the High Courts. It only said that it is only Supreme Court who would have this power. No other High Courts would have this power of validating any laws or any matter that comes under purview of these tribunals. So this case was challenged in the court, and what court said is that under these two articles, right, 323A and 323B, we cannot just make an amendment of the Constitution and take this power from the High Courts of exercising judicial review. So we cannot just have one amendment that takes away this particular power from the High Courts. So the validity of these articles was, denied, and it was said that whatever power is given to the Supreme Court under Article 32 of the Constitution and to High Courts under Article 226 of the Constitution in terms of judicial review is also like a basic structure of the Constitution. So court said that the power to, validate laws that is given to Supreme Courts and High Courts, it is like a basic feature of the Constitution, and we cannot just change it by making a constitutional amendment. So in this particular case, the power of judicial review of High Courts and Supreme Courts was also considered as a part of basic structure that we cannot change by making a constitutional amendment. So this is a case, like these two are cases relating to the concept of judicial review. So I have also included the two cases, so you can remember these two cases relating to judicial review. Anyone knows what this doctrine is? Doctrine of severability. Doctrine of severability under Article 13 of Constitution. Okay, so this is what, for example, there is Article 13, what it says is that any provision, any law that we have, it should be what? It should be in accordance with the provisions of Constitution, right? So what it says is that any law which was applicable before Constitution came, what it will have to do is that it has to be in it has to follow the provisions of Part 3 of the Constitution, otherwise it would be considered as void. The state shall not make any laws that would take away or abridge rights of people under the Constitution, or otherwise what happens is that those laws to the extent of contravention be void. Now what does to the extent of contravention mean? It means, for example, there is any particular law is there, okay, one particular statute is there, but the statute is not violating, the entire statute is not violating the provisions of Constitution. It is just a part of it, okay. So now what happens, for example, there is this particular statute. The statute in total is not violating the provisions of the constitution, but what is it is that it is only one part or one provision of that particular statute which is violating the provisions of Constitution of India. Now in that case, what happens is that if it is only one part of the statute which is violating, that part we would make it as void. This part would not be applicable, but the remaining part will become valid. So that means if there is one particular statute and only one provision of it is violating part 3 of the Constitution, that we would make only this particular part void and not the entire the entire statute. The remaining parts would still be applicable. But sometimes what happens, for example, this particular provision or this particular section was only, like the main thing in that particular statute. And if we are making this invalid, the act itself would have no meaning. So in such cases, what happens is that we would consider the entire act as invalid. If we can separate this part and make it invalid, then we would do that. And the remaining parts would still be valid, still be applicable. But if we cannot do that, we would make the entire statute invalid or the entire statute void. So this is what is called as doctrine of severability. That means something which we can separate. So if this particular article or this particular section can be separated from rest of the statute, then we would do that. Otherwise, the entire statute would become invalid or the entire statute would become void. So this is what is doctrine of severability. It is mentioned under Article 13 Clause 2 of the Constitution. So the main words that we have is to the extent of inconsistency or contravention. So to the extent of inconsistency only it would become void, not the entire one, only if it can be separated. So you can just remember this doctrine as the doctrine of severability or something what we can separate, okay? So if we can separate this provision, we would separate it, remaining part would be valid. And if we cannot do that, what happens is that the entire statute would become void or the entire statute would become inapplicable. Is this doctrine clear? Doctrine of severability? Any doubts, anyone?
Ma'am, can you please simplify it once again, ma'am?
Okay. So take for example, we have one particular statute, okay? Take for example, we have the So take for example, we have the Negotiable Instruments Act. And in another case, what we have is that we have the Motor Vehicles Act. We have the Motor Vehicles Act, okay? We have two different acts. Now take for example, under NI Act, what happens is that there is only one important article, which is 138. It says regarding check bounce, we can file a case. That is like a very main article under NI Act. Now what happens, for example, this particular article is violating any part of the Constitution. If we remove this article, what happens is that the entire act will not have any meaning. Maybe only this is the only provision that is talking about providing punishment or any criminal consequences. Otherwise, the act is only regarding like simple procedures, provisions, etc. In that case, what happens? We cannot remove that particular provision because that is only the main provision, right? If we separate it, the act will have no meaning. So we will make the entire act invalid. The entire act will become not applicable. But in case there is another act where there are like multiple important sections are there, even if we remove one of those sections, there are still other sections which are important, right? For example, if we are removing the fine for not wearing helmet, still the Motor Vehicles Act would have meaning, right? People driving without a license, people driving without driving license, this act would still have meaning. So doctrine of severability basically means we would see whether we can separate that particular section or provision from the rest of the act or not. If it can be separated, we would only make that particular section invalid. If it cannot be separated, we will have to make the entire act invalid, because otherwise we do not have any option. Anyways, the act would have no meaning. So we would make the entire act invalid. Is it clear now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you can also remember this like doctrine of separability. That means if we can separate it, if we can separate that provision, then we would separate it and only make it invalid. If we cannot separate it, the entire thing would become invalid. So this is what we would get under Article 13 Clause 2, to the extent of inconsistency or contravention. That means to the extent of inconsistency, only this provision was inconsistent. So only that thing we would make invalid, rest of the thing would still be applicable. So this is what is doctrine of severability or separability. Now there is one case, A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras. In this case, what happened? A.K. Gopalan was a leader of a communist party and he was detained under the provisions of Preventive Detention Act 1950. So once he was detained, he approached the court saying that that particular detention is violating my right to personal liberty, which is given to me under Part 3 of the Constitution. So the detention is violating right to personal liberty and so it is unlawful. While deciding the case, court found out that it is only section 14 of the Preventive Detention Act which was violating the provisions of Part 3. So what they did is that they saw whether it can be separated from rest of the act or not. Even if we remove Article 14, like section 14, whether the act would have some meaning or some importance or not. So court found out that article like sections 14 can be separated. So what they did is that they declared section 14 of the act invalid. So what basically doctrine of severability is that the court would see whether we can separate that particular thing from rest of the statute or not. If we can separate it, like in this particular case, we would only consider this particular section as invalid. So in this case also court declared only section 14 as invalid. The act was still applicable, only this particular section was not applicable. Otherwise, what the court would do is that the court would declare the entire act or the entire statute as invalid and nothing would be applicable. So these are the three things that we have under Article 13. First is judicial review. Supreme Court and High Court should have power to check the validity of any particular law, and judicial review is considered as a basic structure of the Constitution in L. Chandra Kumar versus Union of India case. Doctrine of severability means whether we can separate a section of a statute or not. If we can separate it, we would consider it as invalid if it is violating Part 3 of the Constitution. If we cannot separate it, the entire statute would be considered as invalid. It is A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras case where this doctrine was applied, where only one section was considered as invalid out of the entire statute. Now next is doctrine of eclipse. So we already discussed this case in last class. Anyone remembers what is doctrine of eclipse? Doctrine of eclipse. Okay, so this is same like solar eclipse and all. Okay, so now what happens? Take for example, this light is a act or an statute. Okay, so consider this light as a statute or an act. What doctrine of eclipse says is that if this particular act or this particular statute, okay, is violating the provisions of part 3 of the constitution, this entire statute or any part of this statute is violating what? Violating part 3 of the constitution, then what we will do is that fundamental rights would consider this black part as fundamental rights. Okay, so what fundamental rights would do is that fundamental rights would shadow that particular statute. That means for the time being, fundamental rights would cover that particular statute and would make it invalid. But if there is any changes in fundamental rights, the act would again become invalid. That means the act is still existing, right? Behind fundamental rights, the act is still existing. Only that fundamental rights has covered it and it is not applicable at that particular moment. But if there are any changes in fundamental rights, the act can again be applied. So doctrine of eclipse is what? It says that any law which is inconsistent with fundamental rights is not totally dead. That means the law is not totally dead. It is only that fundamental rights is covering it for the time being. So they are overshadowed by fundamental rights, but they are not dead. In case there are any changes in fundamental rights, what happens is that that law would again be applicable if it is not violating any provision of the Constitution of India, like part 3 of the Constitution of India. Is it clear? Like, are you finding it difficult, these doctrines?
No, ma'am.
Okay, clear, right?
Can you please give one example?
Okay. So we will discuss one case regarding this. So basically the doctrine is what it says is that if any act or any part of an act is violating any part of part 3 of the Constitution, the act would not be totally dead. It would still be there, but only that fundamental rights would overshadow it. If there are any changes in fundamental rights, the act might again become applicable. Now there was one case. This is the case. So this is the case Vikas Narayan versus State of Madhya Pradesh. In this case, what happened is that there was one act, okay, CP Behral Motor Vehicles Amendment Act 1948. This particular act is what? 1948, right? It was applicable before Constitution of India came. And under this provision, under this act, there was one provision which authorized the state government to take up entire motor transport business to the exclusion of motor transport operators. That means the motor transport business would be completely controlled or like regulated by state government. No private partnership would be allowed in it. Now this particular act was applicable from 1948 to 1950. But what happened is that the provisions were considered as invalid when Constitution of India came in 1950. Why? Because it was violating Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution. 19(1)(g) is what? It is providing us fundamental right to practice any sort of profession or business which is legal in India. So if under this particular act, state government is restricting individual persons to, like do any sort of business in motor transport, that means what? It is restricting our right that is given under 19(1)(g). It is not allowing us to do this particular business. So on this particular ground, this case was filed that it is violating Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution of India. Till now, this is clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now what happened is that means what? This particular under Article 19(1)(g), this act is violating this provision, right? So what happened is that this provision which was not allowing individuals to take part in motor transport business, that particular provision was shadowed by Article 19(1)(g). That means that provision was still there, but Article 19(1)(g) overshadowed it, and that was made not applicable for the time being in 1950. But later on, what happened? There was one amendment made in 1951, and one clause was added that said that there may be certain areas where government has the right to monopolize that business. So government has the right that they would exclude private partnership in it, and they would like carry over that business. For example, regarding electricity, we see, right, it is only state government who is providing us electricity. No private entities or no private individuals can provide electricity. So similarly, there might be certain areas where government has the authority to control that particular area in exclusion of private individuals. So when this particular amendment was made, that means this is again valid, right? So when this amendment was made, the shadow was removed and the provision was again made applicable. So this is what doctrine of eclipse is. It basically means that whatever provision, whatever laws we have, it is not like the law would be completely dead. The law would still be there, but just that fundamental rights would overshadow it for the time being. If there are any changes, if there are any amendments made, fundamental rights would be removed and the act would again become applicable. So this is the case which explains the concept like properly, that this particular act or provision was declared as unconstitutional, it was overshadowed by fundamental rights, and later on what happened is that again it was made applicable when there was the first Constitutional Amendment Act of 1951.
Okay, one question.
Yeah.
So how?
Your voice is breaking. Can you type it in that chat option? Anyone else? Any doubts?
No, ma'am.
I didn't get you.
Okay.
Like I just asked, like, did you answer? I think my internet connection is unstable. I didn't get
No,
it.
no, now it is fine. You can tell me.
Yeah. So, like, how do we decide that which doctrine has to be applied in which case?
Okay.
Like, how do we differentiate between both of these? Like, I get the difference, but how do we decide which one has to be kept under shadows and it has to be removed permanently? Like, how do we decide that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so see now these are like two different doctrines. See now here also, if we are removing this part, removing as in that particular part is not valid, but rest of the thing is still like applicable, right? So it is similar only. In this also, we are not like repealing that particular provision or repealing that particular section. What we are saying is that we are saying that this particular like section or this particular provision would not be applicable and rest of the thing would be applicable. This is like only one concept, how we would like decide what would be applicable and what would not be applicable. Is it the entire act or is it only a part of the act? And here what we say is that it's not like whatever we have decided would not be valid. It's not like that part would be dead, that part would be repealed or something. For the time being, that part would be overshadowed, and then again that may be applicable. So it's not like either one may be applied. It basically explains the concept. So first one says that it may be the entire act or it may be one provision only. And here what it says is that whatever it is, maybe it is the entire act, maybe it is one provision only, whatever it is, what we will do is that we would overshadow it with fundamental rights, not like it would be totally dead.
Okay.
Yeah. So similarly, in this particular A.K. Gopalan case, what happened is that they decided that it's not the entire act, not like the entire Preventive Detention Act, but it is only section 14 which is like invalid, which is inconsistent with provisions of the constitution. Now it is decided that a doctrine of severability can be applied, it can be separated. Now what happens is that the doctrine of eclipse can be applied, that for the time being it would be overshadowed by the fundamental rights. So this case is taken here because in this particular case later on some amendment came and the provision again became applicable. So this case is taken so that you understand the concept that after any sort of amendments the provision may again become applicable. But in the AK Gopalan case, section 14 is has not become applicable again. So this case is taken where it again became applicable. So article 13 is clear, right? Anyone, any doubts? Anyone, if anything is not clear, you can ask. So then we will continue with the remaining articles. I would share another link that should get disconnected in some time. So you can read the cases, and if you want, like, you can read the cases in detail also, so that you understand the concepts. It is the three concepts that are important under Article 13: judicial review, doctrine of severability, doctrine of eclipse, and these are the cases that explains it. Concept of judicial review is borrowed from the Constitution of United States, and it is Marbury versus Madison, in which case the concept of judicial review was introduced. And in this particular case, what happened is that the Indian court said, the Supreme Court said that judicial review is like a basic structure of the Constitution, and it cannot be changed. Like no constitutional amendment can take away this particular right from Supreme Court or from High Courts. So 42nd Amendment, constitutional amendment, was declared as unconstitutional. That it cannot be like it is taking away rights from the High Courts that is given by the Constitution itself. So fine, then I'm ending this meeting. We'll share another link to you.